Dear colleagues, dear students, I wish to welcome you into the opening of the series of seminars concerning the Holy Sepulchre Rehabilitation Project, which is the emblematic source of innovation for the Edicula Erasmus Plus project. Here today, we are joining forces, the Master Course Protection of Monuments, an interdisciplinary course of the National Technical University of Athens, the relevant Master Course of La Sapienza, and the relevant Master Course of Bezalel Academy of Arts. These are joining forces within the Edicula Educational, Digital, Innovative, Cultural Heritage-related teaching activities, the Edicula project, an Erasmus Plus project. And I would like to start my presentation, which is opening this series of seminars by sharing with you the material presenting both the Edicula and the Holy Sepulchre Rehabilitation Project. The Edicula project is a project with partners, the National Technical University of Athens, Sapienza Università di Roma, Bezalel Academy of Arts and Design, Perpetie LSRL for the games, and Israeli Antiquity Authorities from Israel, and the Hellenic Research Institute for Cultural Heritage in Alexandria, Egypt. This is co-funded by the Erasmus program of the European Union and the IKI, which is the Greek partner. So within this seminar, we are attempting to have postgraduate students to participate from all the master courses I present here from the three partners of the Edicula: protection of monuments, science and technology for the conservation of cultural heritage, and the postgraduate urban design program from Bezalel, which is inaugurating this series of seminars of actual 5 circles of 3-hour sessions corresponding to 4 didactic hours, which are equivalent to 7 ECTS if we include the time of studying hours, 10-hour studying hours for our students. So this seminar will be recorded and uploaded at the Edicula Educational Toolkit, and the whole structure of the program relates to the emblematic work of the rehabilitation of the Holy Aedicule of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. It starts with my presentation concerning the innovation and the challenges of the rehabilitation of the Holy Aedicule as a chief scientific supervisor. It follows the presentation of Professor Kores concerning the architectural documentation of the Holy Aedicule in the open city of Jerusalem. Then the next session concerns digital documentation, geometric documentation, which is under the correspondence of Professor Georgopoulos from the School of the relevant school of surveillance of sites. And the third session is about materials, is the chemical engineering group, materials and non-destructive testing. The fourth session concerns the structural assessment of the monument, as well as the structural integrity and the achievement of the structural integrity of the monument. And the fifth is the session which concerns the disposal, digital disposal of data to the public, as well as the monitoring for the sustainability of the monument and the governance and management of the Holy Aedicule rehabilitation project. It concerns a real project, and it is actually working in the line of transfer of the know-how that we developed there, an exemplary interdisciplinary approach that is being presented. The National Technical University team, which developed, which was responsible and which actually assessed and evaluated the project, was comprised by Professor Kores, Professor Georgopoulos, me, who had the honor to be the leader of this group, Professor Spirakos, and Associate today Professor Mouzakis as Deputy Construction Site Management. Through the ages, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem is the most important monument for Christianity, and not only. In the Holy Sepulchre complex at Calvary, there are brought nearby the Golgotha, and which is the crucifixion place, and the tomb of Christ when he has been buried and resurrected. The Holy Tomb was covered by the Holy Aedicule, and it was actually the Edicule, a small construction, a shrine designed in the form of a building, which was transformed through the centuries from a rock-cut grave to a ciborium supported by pillars, and finally at a
We have problems with the Wi-Fi connection of Professor Moropoulou. Stay tuned. We will solve the problem in a couple of minutes.
before rehabilitation and the Holy Aedicule we delivered after rehabilitation are two different monuments in the image, but it is only one that we rehabilitated. Prior to the rehabilitation, we have to mention the historic initiative of the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem to invite the NTUA to diagnose the situation of the Holy Aedicule with the consensus of the other three Christian communities guardians of the Holy Tomb. I had the honor to develop the first interdisciplinary team to make the diagnosis and the documentation with the NTUA team for the protection of monuments, documentation concerning an integrated documentation of the problem, geometric, structural, architectural documentation, characterization of materials and structural layers, the diagnosis, which related to the prospection of the building phases and decay, diagnosis as well as diagnosis of the pathology, and the assessment of the structural susceptibility to the earthquakes and to the stresses that it was submitted in order to propose for materials and rehabilitation interventions with the aim, through dialogue with the custos of the Tomb of Christ, to develop a project of common acceptance. The deformation of the Holy Aedicule was even macroscopically obvious. It was supposed that it consisted of mortars and masonry swelling due to the water precipitation through the open oculus of the dome above the Aedicule for some decades after the restoration by Komnenos. Later on, it was understood that even humidity uptake through capillary rise was a very serious reason, since the water was precipitating from the street of the Christianity Street, and it was going deep down to the channels and underground voids along with other waste. The deformation of the metallic supportive beams was evidenced as well, and that was a very serious reason to have a testimony of the end of life of the iron frame that was placed there by the English period around 1947. The innovative prospection of the non-visible layers of the Aedicule as a major tool for its rehabilitation was a real start of the diagnostic project. Here you might see the 3D support we developed to the design and quantification of materials and rehabilitation interventions after the integrated non-destructive prospection, architectural and geometric documentation, and the digitally restructured internal structure of the Holy Aedicule by the ground-penetrating radar prospection. The interrelated fusion of data became feasible due to the 3D documentation, due to the materials documentation, due to the architectural documentation, which permitted the structural assessment through the construction of the finite element modeling approach, using all the elements of the non-destructive prospection, the modulus of elasticity out of the materials characterization, and of course, all this fused and evaluated on the level of the 3D model. That made feasible to design the iterative process of the main stages of rehabilitation, which gave us the tools to proceed with a strict plan and to proceed effectively within the time limit we had, and it was very, very short. However, the philosophy of this proposal of rehabilitation was the minimum invasive and the maximum compatible and performing interventions with the historic materials and structures. And that means not inducing anisotropy, similar thermohydric behavior, ensuring breathability, not introducing soluble salts, adequate mechanical performance, which was assessed with the FEM, while the non-destructive tests like the infrared thermography were actually documenting compatibility or incompatibility of materials to the structure, and of course the problems of the humidity uptaking. The common agreement of the status quo provides NTUA and me personally with the honor and the huge responsibility to have the supervision, the scientific supervision of the project rehabilitation, and more explicitly, scientific, technical, and administrative aspects of the project were under my responsibility. The signatures of the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, Theophilus III, of the Custos of the Holy Land of the Franciscan Order, Pier Battista Pizzaballa, who was succeeded by Francisco Patton, and the Armenian Patriarch in Jerusalem, Archbishop Nurhan Manufyan, were the actual initiators of the project. And which was the project? The project was a real challenge from every aspect of implementation methodology. First of all, the construction side should comply with the urgent need for continued operation of pilgrimage and of all the liturgies, while the decision making should be scientifically supported by the continuous scientific on-site assessment of all the interventions to the monument, while a crowdsourcing funding was searched out and achieved with the responsibility of the three religious authorities. The project funding, which made feasible the impossible, had been initiated by the World Monuments Fund and Mika Erdogan, and that made really feasible the following attempts to, through the crowdsourcing, to accomplish the funding of the project. The integrated governance of the project by the project owners committee, along with the scientific committee here in green color, and the construction site management committee here with blue color, means a unique project which was governed based by scientific criteria and scientific results in real time at an interface with the evolution of the works at the construction site, and governed by the principles and the values of the three custodians. That means the principles and the values of the Tomb of Christ. This integrated scientific management of the program meant that we should continuously monitor the progress of the works, assess and evaluate them, and see whatever disturbance of the plans should be discussed in order to take decisions on site. The work site is successfully organized without disrupting the flow of pilgrims or the religious functions. An additional lateral support to the 47 iron frame of the British mandate was applied. A pilgrim's flow and safety plan was modified. A conservation lab was established and functioned in the Franciscan Gallery, and at the same time, an interdisciplinary scientific lab was established nearby the Holy Aedicule. The Greek team of restorers and conservators were working in full capacity in 2 shifts, day and night, and the scientific team was working in parallel with all of them. The phases of the works in flow achieved to accomplish the works on time. We started from dismantling and removal of the stone panels, which were transferred to the conservation lab in order to be documented and preserved. Removal of disintegrated and incompatible mortars, repointing of masonry with restoration mortars, partial reconstruction of masonry areas to address swelling, structural inefficiency and damage of the masonry with proper compatible stones from the actual places of the historic constructions which we defined. And of course, a crucial phase was the homogenization of the structural layers and consolidation of the Holy Rock by the injection of compatible grouts. You might see here how we evaluated on site, and that was a very difficult task and very innovative as well, about the procedure of grouting with ground penetrating radar, with infrared thermography, by measuring the pressure within capillary rise of the grouting, and by finally achieving the consolidation of the Holy Rock and the development of an active interface, which is testimony the coherence between the different structural phases, showing up that homogenization was achieved. Of course, NDTs facilitated decisions through monitoring the progress of evolution of grouting. Here you might see through the infrared thermographs. And after this stage, the resetting of exterior columns was a very crucial event because the assessment of the reduction of deviations from verticality during the works was not very simple. It took us to establish a total geodetic station upon the conservation lab and to use for comparison reasons the report of the 1947, the British report, upon which the iron frame was decided. Reinforcements by titanium were the suggested proper, compatible and effective intervention as a next step through bolts and anchors which were designed all around the monument after pull-out tests and after the proper assessment, structural assessment by finite element modeling analysis in order to have the structural integration result that we needed to achieve. Resetting and anchoring of interior marbles, reinstalling the marble panels after the installation of a titanium mesh for cohesion reasons, the reassembly of the stone slabs, which were coming from the conservation lab and were being reassembled at the same place by the code number that we have documented at the beginning. And then the application of the optimized filling mortar in the form of concrete according to the measurement of the gap between the slabs and the internal structures. And then we passed to the conservation, reinforcement, and restoration of the dome. After structural analysis, Professor Corres has designed the metal support for the onion dome, for the outer cupola, and from the Agricultural Zoology and Entomology Laboratory of the Agricultural University of Athens, Dr. Tsangarakis made it to disinfect the wooden elements of wood-boring insects and fungi. A very difficult achievement. And of course, conservation interventions, application of plasters after cleaning and consolidating, preservation of the mural painting, complementing the mural painting, were next phases, along with conservation interventions at the dome of the tomb chamber and the chapel of the angel. The cleaning interventions after proper pilot applications in order to decide for the final materials and procedures were applied, and the same concerns protection interventions as well, which permitted us to preserve the final outcome of the cleaning effect. So the goals at the core of the project, assuring structural integrity, revealing and preserving the values, ensuring sustainability, were under question upon completion of the project. Were these aims achieved? Concerning structural integrity, the time evolution of the column's deviation from verticality permitted us to diminish the deformations and testify this. The multi-layered finite element model, first time ever, because we were documenting all the phases of intervention and we were monitoring the achieved results after the materials and interventions used, permitted us to conclude that the principal stresses, maximum principal stresses, were being buried efficiently and homogeneously. And the response of the retrofitted structure was validated in order to perform in the seismic risks of the area, Jerusalem and the wider area. After these results of the evaluations, we cut and removed the iron frame from installed by the British mandate some 70 years ago. And that was the actual test of the structural integrity testified by all the holy people of the three communities that were there to, with anxiety, to attend what would happen. But the most important is that we were, through this project, revealing and preserving the values of the monument. And here you might see for first time ever that we revealed the holy rock, the archetype material of the burial monument. And we, of course, preserved the gilded decorations, but without developing a Rococo intervention that was some decades after the Baroque restoration of Kalfas Komninos Mytilineos. We achieved to reveal and preserve the frescoes. Here you might see at the chamber of the tomb that we had the mirror bearers made visible, which were not evidenced before. And the opus sectile decorations of the chapel of the angel were preserved, as well as the onion dome exterior surfaces were cleaned and repainted, and the colors of the resurrection were obvious: the rainbow, the moon, the sun. They were evidenced after cleaning. But the most important, the revealing of the exterior facade inscriptions, all in Greek. And that was the cross of Komninos, which was writing Kalfas Komninos Mytilineos Episen made October 15, 1809. And that was the fingerprint of the restoration of Komninos. I should say that Professor Georgopoulos made the reverse photogrammetry to the Holy Aedicule in order to estimate the dimensions of a cross that was simulating the Komninos cross in order to deliver it to the three Christian communities. So the findings and the values were major for these monuments. The 3D reconstruction of the chamber of the tomb before the opening But the major moment, because was the lifting of the stone of the tomb, revealing the burial monument, the tomb of Christ. That was at the 26th of October, 2016, and here with the three custodians of the tomb of Christ, we actually discovered the tomb of Christ. Here you might see the second slab, this gray slab with a cross. We had the permission to perform laminations dating, and it was actually estimated at the Constantine the Great period, this gray slab, even though that around the tomb we discovered mortars from all the eras, the Byzantine, the Crusaders era, the Renaissance era, and the Komnenos restoration as well. And that was very important because even from the Renaissance, from Bonifacio di Ragusa area, we had some important mentions that this was the period when last time the tomb of Christ was opened. But actually, from our findings and our historic context that we studied, it seemed most probably that after the Mamelukes' destruction of the tomb, 1244, according to Oxford, a Biddle testimony, it was at 1345 that a pilgrim saw first time ever the slab we moved on. So it seems that after 7 centuries, we opened the tomb of Christ and we used the most innovative, non-destructive inspection in order to study the morphology and the materials of the monument. As you might see here, with non-destructive testing, we discovered a lot of the morphology and a lot of what was beyond the tomb. And it seemed that the historic continuity of all the findings was showing the respect of all, and the final restorer, Komnenos, before NTUA, who actually preserved findings from Byzantine era to Crusaders era and to his period. Of course, historic representations during centuries permitted us to study the evolution of the architecture of the monument, and at the same time to study the archaeological semantics in the underground area, because there were laying the tombs studied by the archaeologists, especially Israeli archaeologists, and they were actually evidencing the existence of the tomb of Christ. However, all these important underground remnants, channels, and tunnels imposed us the need to document the underground area. And the geometric documentation, as you might see, as well as the non-destructive documentation, were becoming tools to ensure the sustainability of the monument. Of course, the sustainability of the monument is being assessed through time, and it was very important, beyond the installation of ventilation and dehumidification system, to install a multimodal performance health monitoring for hydrothermic loads, for seismic loads, and for a precision monitoring through a geodetic network. in order to ensure sustainability through time. But the most important, the first sign of sustainability was that we had a new pilgrim's attitude, which was actually required in order to respect the monument, and the pilgrims respected the monument. But the rising dam, intense phenomena that were observed were actually a risk for the underground area. And the non-destructive perspection in the underground area by ground penetrating radar, by electrical resistivity survey, by electromagnetic probe systems and robotic cameras permitted us to study all the risks, to allocate them, to map them in order to make the study which we actually delivered to the three custodians along with the project for the underground interventions needed at the Holy Sepulchre Rotunda to assure safety and sustainability of the Holy Aedicule rehabilitation, to assure sustainability from differential settlement of the Holy Aedicule, to install a peripheral drainage and ventilation gallery, and actually to stabilize the rotunda through installing these pillars in the underground area, as well as by installing new sewage and rainwater networks in the underground area. The work finished, but the need to transfer along with the know-how, the data, is semantic data. That means a content-based management, a multi-layer management of information with an architecture that would permit to integrate and reconstruct the whole of the monument and of interventions is a need. Today, we comply with this need through a project called Respect in order to make all the data available to the scholars of the world. And that was the reason that the European Union, before delivering the Holy Aedicule to the three custodians, required a presentation from us some days before, and it became an exemplary project. The project we delivered on time at March 22nd of 2017 at the Holy Sepulchre with the presence of Christian unity, not only on Jerusalem level, but on ecumenic level as well, with all the political and diplomatic representatives of the Middle East and European and international area being presented with Greece at the epicenter. The Holy Aedicule before and after interventions showed that what is the impossible, which should be made feasible today, is to sustain this work. That's why we continue research, and we are keen to explain to the world, as we did during the project, what is happening. Every steering committee was followed by a media presentation, and the strategic cooperation with National Geographic, which presented the historic opening of the tomb with exclusivity and first time ever, made it feasible for 2 to 3 billion people around the globe in all continents to attend the works at the Holy Aedicule. And the digital experience exhibition, an immersive experience, which started with National Geographic at its museum in Washington at November 15 of 2017, and continued in the Byzantine and Christian Museum of Athens in May 2018 to February, actually, 2019, permitted us to inform society. And Christian unity became social unity. It was a project that was digitized, and that was not only digitized, but was discussed here at the first transdisciplinary multispectral modeling and cooperation conference for the preservation of cultural heritage in Athens, which will be followed by the next one after 10 days, 13 days from today. This project is signed by all the interdisciplinary group, all the members of the scientific team from all the schools of NTUA and not only, from the technical and engineering staff, restorers, conservators from the construction side, and of course, when we present it, we have always to remember the three project owners which entrusted the project to us. It is an alive monument that talks to all humanity, and it touched our soul as well. Innovation only amplified its voice. Professor Georgopoulos will show and explain to you how we performed the geometric documentation, a 3D documentation, and that was a very important tool because today it is a holistic approach. We started from a fragmented approach, and then we, by transferring this knowledge to other projects and to other entities, we develop with all of you a new perspective for a new era for the preservation of monuments, where the 3D documentation permits to fuse and merge all the scientific disciplines' data and communicate in a common language different disciplines, architects, historians of art, archaeologists, theologists, engineers, civil engineers, materials engineers, informatic engineers, and this integrated upon a monument. That's why we say that monuments talk to us, and they talk to us in a language that we can transfer this talking and the knowledge to the others. As you might see, from Oxford to Milano and from many others, dialogue and research, interventions, and revealings. We are coming to the second international conference, the TMM, which will take place from 13 to 15 December in the Eugenides Foundation in Athens this year, and you are all invited. At the same time, we will discuss at this conference the Edicula Approach. That means how to disseminate through education the interdisciplinary and integrated research and know-how to strengthen the cooperation between NTUA and UniRoma, which is now responsible, scientifically responsible for the underground work for which we delivered the study, to utilize the innovative work to transcut with the history of architecture in Jerusalem through cooperation with Bezalel Academy and Israeli Israeli archaeology, and to promote transdisciplinarity as an educational lever in the protection of cultural heritage through cooperation with the HRIAC, that means the Hellenic Research Institute of Alexandrian Culture, and in cooperation with Perpetual SRL in Romania for the gamification and the visualization of the knowledge gained through the educational toolkit. Of course, the objectives of the Edicula concern with reforming the curricula of the 3 postgraduate programs properly, to develop the Edicula Teachers course, to proceed with multiplier events. That means hands-on events in Jerusalem and Alexandria, which will start at 22, and with special conference sessions in Athens, which will take place in the next fortnight. Of course, we have the aim to promote students to a professional and entrepreneurship mentality. That means advancing education in collaboration with enterprises concerning technical works and digital applications, and enhancing learning outcomes to ensure professional qualifications. This will take place as well at the panel concerning bridging cultural stakeholders with science and industry in the TMM conference as well. Here you might see the various tasks, working packages and tasks of the Edicula project, the educational toolkit, the multiplier events, the Edicula teachers course, and of course all the project management and implementation. I would like to say that through your interaction to this series of seminars, we are aiming to develop the educational toolkit as an interactive platform, which will perform not only the target to transfer the know-how, but to open new critiques and discussions for the future trends in protection of monuments. I would like to invite you to make your comments and to thank you very much for attending this hour of presentation. Thank you. So if there is any major comments or questions before giving the floor to Professor Kores, because we have a quarter of an hour of delay. Okay, that's great. So I have to say good afternoon to Professor Kores, to Professor Turner. They are mostly welcome, and give them the floor. Then at the end, you might pose your questions. You might send them in chat as well, because we have to consider them for the development of the seminars. Thank you very much.